Welcome to WAM, the Wellness, Arts, and Military Podcast. We connect military communities with enriching arts programs for overall well-being. Join us to explore creativity, wellness, and resilience.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness, Arts, and Military Podcast. This is a special episode with Arts in Public Places. In our first segment, we have Mike Sweeney, the Art in Public Places Manager, who will talk about the 2025 to 2029 Public Artist Roster. So without further ado, hello, Mike.
Well, good morning, good afternoon. Mike Sweeney, and I am the Program Manager for Art in Public Places. And what we're up to now is our 2025 to 29 Public Artist Roster. The Public Artist Roster is a list of artists that are eligible to create public art for the state. So the state has a 0.5% program. And what that means is 0.5% of the state's portion of construction costs are set aside for public art. We've been doing this now for, this is actually our 51st year. So we started in 1974. We're the second oldest statewide public art program in the country.
Congrats.
And but we can also say we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of our first acquisition, which was in 1975. We work throughout the state with the community and technical college system, with the state university system, with state agencies, and quite a bit with K-12 schools, which is highly unusual for a statewide public art program. About 2/3 of our projects are in public schools. Mm-hmm. And we work with local committees. So what we call our partner agencies, and all those, what that means is any site that has public art and has funding for public art, they put together a committee of folks that are connected to it could be local community members, it could be staff, faculty. We've had students, even with elementary schools, we'll sometimes have students, which is the sweetest thing ever. But they represent their community and their campus or agency. And we're really focused on local decisions. And so what we mean by that is, even though we will bring a process, we facilitate meetings, we write contracts with artists, we let them decide on key things. And the most key of all, and the reason we're here today, is they get to select their artist. And as a state agency spending state funds, we have an obligation to make sure that at least we put up some guardrails around that. And really the guardrails we put around that are ensuring that the list of artists that are eligible for projects have been through a competitive process. I don't want to overstress the word competitive, but there is a process of application and acceptance to get onto the state roster. Mm-hmm. We are looking for good artists. And when I say I don't want to put too much of a stress on that word competitive, there was a time throughout quite a bit of the history of this program where to get onto the roster was quite competitive, meaning maybe 50%, sometimes fewer than that, would be accepted the roster. It was sort of like a grant panel. There would be a line, and we would accept artists above that line, but not below it. Right. And we've done a lot of internal, I don't know, hand-wringing is the wrong word, but I think we put a big focus on experience, meaning that you needed to have had a public art project before, that you were working with a scale or durable materials that were commensurate with public art projects. Mm-hmm. And we realized we were unintentionally excluding artists that were just super talented, that didn't have the resources on their own to create durable, permanent works. So we've now put a focus on artistic excellence and on bringing in artists that are just good artists. And there's no quota as to who gets on the roster.
Gotcha. Are there any specific materials that they need to include, or is it what's based on their project?
Yeah, again, we're putting a focus on strong artists. And so what we mean by that is, if you're, I mean, hypothetically speaking, if you make artwork out of paper mache, for instance, but it's amazing, our goal will be to find a way to translate that into durable materials, to work with an artist to either help them brainstorm some potential materials they could work with, or give them some resources as to work, say, with fabricators. A lot of artists will work with other artisans or other industrial, whether it's a metal cutter or a bronze foundry, to help realize the design that they have in mind.
Is there a specific timeline since it is a
A
couple?
timeline for the
Yeah.
roster?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. The roster, we're going to be putting out applications. We have an application portal, which is completely online, and that'll open on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, May 6th. And it will be open for approximately 6 weeks. So June 17th is the closing of that, which we figured is enough time for folks to get their materials together and apply. It's fairly simple to apply. It's an online platform. You could even do it with a smartphone. It's probably easier if you have a computer, but not everybody does. You need to upload 8 images, statements about those works, telling us what this is about, what's the name of it, when was it
Mhm.
made. We also have de-emphasized sort of professional resumes. That was also something that used to be a requirement. We're now asking for artistic statements and personal statements. And so you're able to talk about the influences on your work, who you are, where you've come from. And it gives artists an opportunity, if they want to talk about the fact that they had a one-person show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, go for it. But you could also just talk about influences and mentors. It really
Nice.
does try to cover artists, where they're coming from in any way that they want to discuss. One of the things that I think is also important about that change, and we really encourage artists that have a personal background that could influence the work that they do to talk about that. For instance, if you are a culture bearer, a native artist, you can talk about that. It's not any, we don't share demographic information with committees. It's really not important. I mean, it may be important to you as an artist, but it's not important as a defining quality. We're not allowed, as a state, we're not allowed to use race or ethnicity as criteria, right?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
that information is stripped out. That doesn't mean that one can't share that in a personal statement, again, if it's something that influences your work. I would also say, for this audience in particular, if a military background is something that is important to you as an artist or a person, anything that can influence your work that you feel like it's worth sharing, I highly encourage that. We have worked, one of the state agencies we've worked with is the state military department.
Mhm.
We've done several projects at readiness centers for the National Guard. I know that that's something that they're looking for lived experience. I don't mean that particular group, but most of our groups are interested in working with artists that they feel share a connection with them.
Right. Could you talk a little bit more about that readiness center?
Sure. So we currently have a project that we're doing in Richland, which is the Tri-Cities Readiness Center. I'm not managing that project, but I know that's something that's in full motion right now. They're working with an artist. I don't know that he has a military connection or not, but the design is evolving. So I can't tell you exactly where that's going at this point. But I did a project with Thurston County. No, I'm sorry. We did one with Thurston County. I did one with Pierce County Readiness Center, and the artist for that was Jack Archibald, who did stained glass project inside, and it's spectacular. And the commander was part of that committee. I think everybody was part of the military staff, and it's just a joyous. Again, all of our projects are about enhancing and activating space. We put a real priority on artists having their own voice, but doing work that is connected to location. So in Jack's case, and this is Jack Archibald is the glass artist again that I worked with in Pierce County. His work is abstract. It's evocative though, and so the imagery within there wasn't literal, meaning you couldn't see objects or people or anything. But it was about optimism, about moving forward. There was a real sort of powerful, evocative feeling that one got from that artwork, and also just the way that it brought light into that space where the National Guard trains
Mm.
was something that was just super exciting about that project.
That's awesome. And when can that be seen, or when will it be finalized?
Well, so Jack's project was installed several years ago.
Oh,
The project in Richland is a project, though, we're hoping is going to be finalized in the next few months in terms of the design, and then the artist will probably have about a year to install.
Nice.
I'm not sure where that building is. Sometimes we're able to get in when a building is under construction, or even before it's under construction, but sometimes by the time we are really involved, the building is already up.
That's great. Is there any last pieces of information about the roster that people should know about?
Absolutely. So we've got information on our website right now. If you go to arts.wa.gov, which is the agency's main website, when the roster launches on the 6th, it'll be right on that front page of the website, and there'll be information about how to apply, tips to put your portfolio together. We are also doing a webinar that is free to the public, and the webinar is going to be on the 13th of May. And that'll be even a broader dialogue with a question and answer at the end about what is the roster, and is this something that's right for you? So not everybody wants to work with committees and have people have a conversation. And I think you'll probably hear from David a little bit more about what that process looks like. But if you're making art, we'd love to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for telling us about it, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to the Wellness Arts and Military Podcast. Now we have David Eisenhour with us. David Eisenhour is a public artist who was on the public art roster. He's a sculptor and an Army veteran. David, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your artistic background, who you are?
Sure. I was born in northern Pennsylvania and spent my youth through high school in the country. And I think that had a lot of influence on my artwork. And I knew that I wanted to express myself somehow. So photography was the first thing, and then watercolor painting. And very poor, grew up very poor. So the military was a way for me to get out of where I was. And it was in peacetime, luckily, and I chose to be stationed in Germany. So that definitely had a big influence on my artwork, too. When I returned and exited the military, I ended up living on the eastern shore of Virginia for some 10 odd years, where I came across, I worked a lot of really bad jobs, like the night shift at Purdue Chicken Factory, but I came across, I was doing watercolor paintings, a small foundry that was doing fine art, and that's all they were doing was fine art castings. And I went in with my paintings and told them I learned how to weld in the military, which I did. And they hired me right away. And I kind of moved right to the top and was supervising all the artwork pretty fast and knew that I wanted to cast in bronze myself.
That's amazing.
That's where I started casting in bronze. Then after about 10 years, I was getting antsy, getting bored, and looked and found my brother invited me to come out to Washington State. He was living here. And I noticed that there were several foundries in the Port Townsend area. So I ended up working at Riverdog Fine Arts Foundry in Chimacum. And that had a big influence. One of the biggest influence there was a sculptor, Phil McCracken, and he did a lot of lyrical naturalism, and I just really loved his work and him. Ann Morris was another one that was there, and Phil Levine, and so I worked there until 2000, and my wife said, "Why don't you just work full time on your artwork?" Because I was starting to get shows and selling.
Mhm. What made you want to go into metal artwork?
The first time I saw bronze poured, in the act of actually pouring it, and then the molds being removed. And I think I'm just a big fan of process in general. When I was doing black and white photography, I like to develop my own film,
Mm,
effects on it, stuff like that. So
yeah,
there's
the
a lot of
processes.
process with a fine art casting.
Wow, very nice. And so, what you did with the public roster was you worked with the Ocosta Elementary School. So I was wondering, could you walk us through the concept behind that project?
Sure, sure. So when I visited Acosta, I knew right away that I wanted to do something that involved the sea. There's been a lot of that in my body of work for the last 10 years. It's all around me here and it was all
Yep.
around Chesapeake Bay. So
Mhm.
I thought about something that would connect them to where they live. And that's
Mhm.
why I named it Sense of Place, because I wanted them to have a sense of their place. And I wanted the children to be involved. I mean, it's a community of fishing people, and there's
Yeah.
a living that's made off of the ocean there. So what I came up with, I had been doing oversized things for quite a while. I've been doing a series of seeds actually that I look at under a microscope and then make them an appreciable size, from 1 foot to
Mhm.
2 foot. And I thought I would do that with things found on the beach that were natural. So shells, bits of seaweed, crab claws, things along that line. So what I did was I wanted to get the kids involved. So I told the teachers, take your kids down to the ocean and tell them pick up natural things. And I don't want bottle caps and stuff like that. That's not what this piece is about. It's about the beauty of the ocean and our connection to Mother Ocean. And they did, and they sent me a whole box of stuff. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 16 images, and we'll put those on the wall of the school. And the other thing I thought about was let's put them on the wall of the school for all of them. Let's put one down at like 3 foot so the first graders can walk right up to it and touch it. And one
Oh, I
5
see.
foot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, tell the kids that I'll choose half of this from what they um, chose. So then I took all of the pieces that I used, the ones I gathered myself and the ones that they gathered, and I put them in a box, and that went inside the school so they could compare the two, and so the
Mhm.
kids could all brag and say, I chose that one, which
Oh, that
teachers
is
say they,
sweet.
they do. They all claim that they chose one, which is
They chose that one. Oh,
great,
man.
And I've noticed that the pieces are becoming, last time I visited down there, polished in certain places. That's great. And the bronze is, if you look at bronzes all over the world, the dog's nose will be polished, or the person's hand will be polished, and so forth. So
Nice. So that was kind of their role in this artwork. How do you envision this piece impacting the students in the future? I know you said that, people are still visiting it and it's a part of the school, right? So it's constantly going to be there with the kiddos. But, do you see an even larger impact to the people that are going to be having their future kids go to that schools or the teachers?
well, I hope that it gives them a connection to that world that's just right there, literally right next to the school, and that it gets them out in the natural world and out on the coastline, and how important and how we all have a very primordial connection to the ocean. And I hope in that sense that it also inspires maybe some of these kids to think about artwork related
Hmm.
action or artwork related to nature, our connections, and to the natural world in general.
Yeah. And I love the process too. We talked about how a big part of your artwork is the process, and the kids were a part of this. Is there anything that you would say you took personally from this project?
Yeah, definitely. Some of the forms, like I started really looking at seaweed forms, and there's several in the 16 images that are there. And that turned into what I'm doing right now in the series of work that I'm doing right now that's coming up for a solo show at Smith and Valley is I'm doing a lot of and have for the last year and a half, 2 years of rocks and then found objects that have, as though they're underwater and the seaweed is attached to them. It's called a holdfast where the reef attaches. So I'm doing various imagery that relates to the sea and the land, and also can be relating to fossil fuel, the rise of the ocean. This latest series is pretty interesting. There's horseshoes and pitchfork, just ahead of the pitchfork.
Oh, very cool.
Agriculture and the sea. So that definitely, for me, that moved me in that.
Yeah, it's still a part of what you've been doing. So I know you're talking about this as it's upcoming. Is there any more information you'd want to say about this, where people can go to see it, when it's opening?
Sure, yes. So Smith and Valley Gallery is in Edison, and that is in the Skagit Valley. And if you've never been there, it's one of the most beautiful places in Washington State. It's going to open June 5th, Thursday. And I believe we might be starting into tulip season then. So the whole valley is
nice
with flowers. It's a very small town, but it is just chock-a-block full of artists and shops. And there's the Edison Eye Gallery also, which is an amazing gallery. So it's a great,
wonderful,
great town. Yeah.
Man, might have to go up there. I just went up there for the tulip festivals too. So I'm sure that's when you said Skagit, I was like, I'm sure so many people are going to just know where that is because of the recent tulip festivals. And, there is a culture of appreciating the beauty there. So that's lovely.
Tourism draw, which is really great for the arts, because people coming through to see the beauty of the place. And then there's generally a lot of artists that work in that genre of landscape and so forth, and natural.
Yep, definitely. I wanted to ask you specifically, how has your own military experience shaped your perspective as an artist, or even influenced the work that you create today?
Definitely just the two places that I lived, Germany and the arts there while I was there, and then being stationed in the Chesapeake Bay, which led me to come out here. But also, I would say, underlying in the sense of maybe discipline, because that's a big part of the military. And I think that I was a bit disciplined before I went into the military, but it gave me a sense of that, and that is how I do my work. And on a daily basis, I get up and I go into the studio. There's certain hours that I keep, and I try to stick to them.
The consistency, having that daily routine that you get up and you're doing your work. That's awesome. That's great to hear. We have a lot of veteran artists that work with the WAM team as well. And so would you have any tips as being an artist, a part of the art roster in the past for them?
Well, I know that I like to look for things that I feel would engage me, so that I'm being honest with my work, so that I don't want to go after a certain public art project simply because it's another public art project. I want to feel like I have some connection to that. And I think to convey that, what you are and what your connections are, how you work, what inspires you, and that's what you're interested in.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. And is there any last words about you that you'd like to say on the podcast, or where people can find you, social media?
Sure. So I'm at EisenhowerSculpture.com and Eisenhower Sculpture on Instagram. Instagram is what I use the most. So you can find reels on there and lots of artwork, and you'll see pieces that are in my upcoming show June 5th at Smith and Valley Gallery.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, and nice meeting everybody, and
Thank you so much.
part of this.
Thanks for tuning in to WAM, the Wellness, Arts, and Military Podcast, where we're more than just finger paints. Stay connected with us for more inspiring stories and resources. And remember, art and well-being are a powerful pair.